Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Sparky sent me a note and said, Steve, check out this proposed law out of Illinois, and then included a link, and I went and looked, and sure enough, there's a proposed law. And it's an interesting one because I remember when these things came into use, when a car dealer would sell a car to somebody and say, by the way, we've put a device on it. If you stop making payments or get behind in your payments, we will make it so the car is disabled and you cannot start the car. The car will not start. And people, of course, were buying cars that had those things on them. And there were some complaints being made that occasionally they'd be driving along and the car would just die and then they couldn't restart it. So, for instance, if it happened to you like in an intersection or on the road, it might be a dangerous situation. And some people were saying they were driving along and their car died because this thing somehow malfunctioned. And of course, the question is, did it simply stall on its own and wouldn't restart? What are the odds? Anyways, Illinois Senate Bill 1978. Illinois Senate Bill 1978. It amends the Illinois Vehicle Code, and this is if the bill gets passed. It is still working its way up Capitol Hill, just like a bill on Capitol Hill. And it talks about disablement technology, which is any instrument, device, machine, or equipment, whether software or hardware, that can be used to disable the starter of a motor vehicle, prevent fuel from flowing to the engine, prevent electricity from flowing to the engine, or otherwise prevent the vehicle from being started or driven by a person. So they're talking about any of these devices, but my understanding was the most common ones simply made it so the starter would not engage. The bill, if passed, would provide that disablement technology shall not be used as an aid to the physical retrieval of a vehicle as part of a repossession or as a consequent for non-payment under a retail installment contract or other instrument. So you cannot use this to repossess the vehicle or to shut it off when someone stops making payments. So they're going to outlaw this entirely if the bill passes. It also provides that a violation is an unlawful practice within the meaning of the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act. I mentioned that many states have got what's often referred to as an Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act, the UDTPA. And many states have got ones that are similar to each other because there was a model set of rules that somebody came up with and many states adopted them. So they're saying that they're going to amend their statute and say specifically that using such disablement technology would be a violation of the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act. The law would also provide that a consumer whose vehicle is subject to the activation of disablement technology may bring an action against an activating person or entity for damages of $1,000 per month per violation, plus actual damages and attorney fees. And by the way, I've also heard of people who bought a car used and were driving around with it, and it stopped running. They took it to a mechanic, and the mechanic goes, oh, it's got this weird disabling device on it. You got to talk to your lender. Person goes, no, I paid cash for it. I don't owe any money on this car. And so somehow somebody just sold the car with that technology in place without removing it. And then if that malfunctions, that's another problem. Just throwing that out there. It provides, if passed, that disablement technology may be offered for sale or sold only as an anti-theft device, either on its own or for an additional fee in connection with the purchase of a motor vehicle. So if somebody says, look, we can put this on there, so if your car is stolen, we can shut it off, that's perfectly legal. Also, the law requires a motor vehicle dealer that sells a motor vehicle containing disablement technology to comply with the specified requirements. Now, this statute also adds some interesting language, and it says that data generated or stored by disablement technology as a result of a consumer's vehicle usage is the personal property of the consumer, and the consumer is entitled to all profits and other benefits flowing from the sharing or sale of the data. So if the disablement technology contains a black box and a GPS connection and tracks where you go, for instance, on the theory that they're tracking the car in case they need to repossess it, they can't take that data and sell it to anybody else. I don't know if anybody's doing that yet. The reason I ask is that generally speaking, data sales usually involves larger data sets, not just what's this one person doing. And so I don't know, and I've actually never heard of anybody doing that with the disablement technology, but I can see how it could happen. And if you know more about this than I do, and you've actually heard of that happening, please chime in below. The law also, if passed, provides that data generated or stored by disablement technology that is installed in a consumer's vehicle and data transmitted by or through the disablement technology that relates to the consumer or the consumer's use of the vehicle may not be sold or otherwise shared with any third parties except as required by federal, state, or local law or required by court order. I've had a lot of people ask me, they'll say, Steve, this law says they cannot share my data. What about if it gets subpoenaed? Well, a subpoena would be a court order. So a court order could make somebody turn that information over. Finally, it makes a corresponding change in the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act. So part of this, I guess, falls under the Illinois Vehicle Code, talking about what can and cannot be on a vehicle. And then the violation of it becomes a violation of the Illinois Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act. And so this is an example of something where I think a lot of people would say, well, gee, if I sell you a car on time, meaning that you're going to make payments to me, and somewhere down the road you stop making payments, shouldn't I be able to stop you from using the car? Well, you can repossess the car. You can repossess the car. And so the real problem, I think, is not the theory or the concept. Because I think the idea, if the car is sitting in your driveway and you didn't make a payment and we shut the car off so it can't be driven, I don't think most people would disagree with that. But the bigger problem we have is, and there were examples where people said, I was driving down the road and my car shut off. I couldn't get it to restart, and I called the dealership and said, hey, my car is not running. What do I do? And they said, well, you haven't made any payments, or you stopped making payments, or we shut your car off because you're late. And somebody said, yeah, but when you shut the car off and I'm driving, should that shut the car off? And it's not supposed to if it just disables the starter. But there were some allegations that these things were either installed incorrectly or whatever. It may have just been a real fluky coincidence. The car happened to stall the same day they shut off the starter. I don't know. But I remember there was a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of a person who bought a car from a dealership in Michigan, Southfield, Michigan. And a friend of mine was the one who filed that action. And interestingly, through a variety of circumstances that came together, the Wall Street Journal did an article on it, and it actually got widespread attention. I'm talking about across the country. And I remember watching that happen, and it then came out that it was actually a fairly common practice, just not that every dealer was doing it, it's just that there were dealers doing it all over the place. And it was almost, obviously, buy here, pay here lots that would do that, because obviously they're the ones who sell you the car, they're the ones who put the technology on the car, and they're the ones who are interested in making sure you pay. However, not all of them were buy here, pay here. Some of them had deals with lenders, and quite often it was subprime lenders, but they had deals with lenders saying, if you'll let this person buy a car, we'll install one of those things on there and you guys can. And I think there was a company out there, a vendor, that made themselves available to the car dealerships saying, we'll get you the equipment, you'll pay us a fee, and then if ever comes a time that you need to shut that car off, we can do it for you. And so that fee then, of course, will get baked into the transaction as well. So this is not a law yet, but it is a proposed law in Illinois. So I'm not sure how widespread this is with respect to how many people are doing it now. I don't know. But I've heard of it from time to time, and it usually happens where somebody says, I was driving along, car died, wouldn't restart. I called the dealership, and they said, oh yeah, we shut your car off. And some people don't understand that it was the starter that was shut off, not the engine. But many people said, well, they shut the starter off, not the engine. Why did the car die when it did? Well, it's probably a piece of junk car being sold by a buy here, pay here lot that's going to die at any random moment. That's always a possibility. But I know that some people actually wonder about those oddities that happen. And I don't know why, but it reminds me of a story. Years ago, General Motors recalled a whole raft of cars, and they had a problem. And that was something to do with the distributor. And the distributor had a printed circuit thing inside of it that was actually printed on a piece of almost like plastic that had adhesive on one side and was stuck to something, but it actually contained a circuit board in essence, but it was not a hard board. It was actually soft, and it was in essence adhered to the inside of something in the engine. And at the time, it was a cost-cutting maneuver. And they discovered a really weird problem. In warm environments, after a few years, that adhesive would work its way loose. And as you're driving down the road, as it worked its way loose, if you made a turn, a sharp enough turn at a high enough speed, it would cause that tape, in essence, to come off, and it would actually cause the circuit to break, and the car would stall. And they started getting complaints that cars would stall in intersections making left-hand turns. Not right-hand turns, left-hand turns. And at first, when you hear something that's that unusual, your first thought is, wait, does that even make any sense that the car would stall turning left but not right? And so they debated this for a while, but as the complaints started to pile up, more and more people started looking at it. And somebody said it's happening in warmer states, and it's happening in left-hand turns, and it's happening in the vehicles that have got that circuit board printed on that thing that's adhered to the inside of the other thing that on a left-hand turn would want to go like this. On a right-hand turn, it wouldn't. Left-hand turn, yes. And of course, where are you often making a left-hand turn that sharply with acceleration? Oh, while you're making a left-hand turn in an intersection. So light is green, you pull in the intersection. As traffic clears, you hang a left and you step on it and your car stalls. And so there was a massive recall on those. And so that's one of those things where your car stalls and it's a dangerous situation. So that is what got the attention of the first cases with these disabling devices, at least the first cases I ever saw, where people said it wasn't that I walked out in the morning and my car wouldn't start. It's that I was driving down the road and the car died and wouldn't restart. And yes, it's possible that the disabling device had nothing to do with the car stalling. But of course, if the car does stall in traffic and you can't get it restarted, it creates an awkward situation at least, and possibly an unsafe situation. So this is a proposed statute in Illinois. It has not been passed yet. I will continue to follow it, but Sparky, Senate, thanks a lot. I love this stuff. Illinois SB, Senate Bill 1978, and it's been introduced in the 103rd General Assembly of 2023 to 2024. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Travel light. Don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders.